And welcome to episode number 94 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And what a week. Wow, 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 wow. Crazy end to round one, at least for one of the matchups. The other one was mostly decided all week. But really, just a great way to get these playoffs started. I was driving through back roads in Vermont. So I very luckily was not following it too closely yesterday. We're recording this on Monday, but we have our semis matchup set. It's going to be me versus Erik and you versus Jake. It's time to go.
Yeah, time to go. I know there was a lot of competition between Yumi and Jake to see who would get that 2 seed. That was a big dominant conversation there for about a month. And at the end of the day, all of us made it to the semis. So uh, it's go time now. These are the top 4 seeds. I believe last year also the top 4 seeds made it to the second round. I think Conor was the 4 seed
I think so.
last year. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Last year, it was the 3 and the 4 that ended up winning in the semis. Hey, if that happens again, that means it's you and me in the finals. That would certainly be fun. But uh, we don't just base things off of last year's precedent. We actually play the games here. So uh, we it's going to be a fun 7 days. But before we get to the next 7 days, let's break down the matchups that did occur last week. First off, congratulations to Conor and Yuki on a great season. Before we dive into the matchups here, quickly for seeding implications or draft pick implications, that now means that Conor, as the 6th seed, losing in the first round, now has the 7th pick. And that pick is actually owned by Erik. And the 8th pick is Yuki's pick. That pick is owned by Yuki. Yuki comes a far way from last year when he won the lottery and had the number 1 overall pick. So kudos to Yuki there. Which matchup do we want to talk about first?
Well, let's talk about the one that went down to the final day. That was my 6-6 win over Yuki. I have picked ties correctly 2 weeks in a row. I correctly picked the score of this matchup somehow. It was the first ever tie-broken playoff matchup in our league's history. And it was me versus Yuki. We've talked a little bit about luck having gone against me so often in the regular season. Had luck been a little bit on my side, I could have been the 2 or even the 1. But I I sure had that luck this week. I mean, I played great, but it took a lot of luck for me to beat a Yuki money-led Moneyball team, which also played great. And I sure am fortunate to be in the semis. And I have you to thank. You are the reason I'm in the semis. You won my matchup for me. Congratulations. I'm sure you're very excited about that. You convinced Yuki to bench Nico Horner in the Sunday night game at 8 o'clock. Why was there an 8 o'clock Sunday night game? It's normally 7.
Yeah, I was
But
trying to figure that one out because, like, if that game started at 7, like literally every other Sunday night game, it wouldn't have been an issue. Like he would have just started them. But the one of the main reasons it was an issue was because the Phillies Nats game got delayed by so long. Like they played 2 innings, then the rain happened, so they were still going. Yuki would have known what he would have needed. Had that game not been delayed and just finished on time, and Yuki presumably would have started his Cubs and would have won. But because that game was still going on, like late, almost until 8 o'clock, Yuki kind of just had to make a decision based off of his gut. Unfortunately, his gut ended up being wrong, and it kind of led to a little bit of an anticlimactic finish in the sense that the 8 o'clock game didn't matter because the only player Yuki had was Camilo Doval. Doval ended up getting a save that made it a 6-6 matchup from a 4-7-1 matchup, but you had the seeding tiebreaker, so that was enough for you to advance.
Yeah,
But
but let's not you said Yuki trusted his gut. Let's not downplay your role in me having a semis appearance. You convinced Yuki, you were the one who told Yuki, hey, you should just bench the Cubs, guys. You got the win locked up.
no, I said that it could flip if Bohm, like I said, Bohm could flip OBP. I did say that in the chat.
Yeah, well, you said that after 10 minutes of telling him to do it. He might not have even seen that message.
Well, Yuki said after he said it, he had poor reception and he wasn't able to check. And I'm willing to bet he presumably would have checked if he could have. Um, it is unfortunate the way this played out for him. And I feel bad that this is how it played out for him. But I am not the reason that he lost.
I don't know. The idea was not at all in his head. He thought it was illegal. He thought it was a thing he wasn't even allowed to do until you told him.
No, he thought it was legal. He just thought it was kind of a dick move.
Yeah, well, he thought it was a dick move, but he didn't realize that it wasn't a dick move.
All right. Well, God, now I kind of want Erik to win this week. You know what? It's almost in a way this might be better because if you lose this week, I could say the semis curse is real. Of course, it would have been funnier if after thinking the semis curse is a thing, you just end up losing in the quarters. But you know what? It's fine. You know what? It after all the Yuki bashing I did earlier this year, which I was very wrong about. You know what? Maybe I needed to do something to make my prediction about Yuki's team look better. But congratulations to Yuki. It was a great season. I think I speak for most of the league when I say I thought his team outperformed expectations, and honestly, I think he did a lot with a little. I think that this is just a really good job of him managing a team and figuring out what strengths he had, where his weaknesses were, and he didn't have the most talented roster, but he was able to eke out some big wins. And I'm curious to see where this offseason takes him, but yeah, definitely an unfortunate way for him to finish the season.
Absolutely, yeah. He definitely has some strength. He's got it. He gets a ton of saves every week. He outsaved me 7-6 this week, which was a huge storyline.
And this is after he traded you one of his closers.
That's true. Yeah, he traded me. What's his name? David Robertson, who got a save this week. He struck out 7 in just 3 innings. Yeah, no, he really did. He was great all season in saves. He still had that room to give up a guy. I know we talked about that in the trade deadline recap, how Yuki had room to spare. It's funny looking. I mentioned those strikeouts from Robertson. He struck out 3 in his save on Friday. I didn't have a single starter go. I had 8 strikeouts on Friday. Yuki did have a starter go who had just 3 strikeouts. I was definitely worried I would lose Ks. I actually increased my lead in Ks despite him having a starter and me not having a starter. Back to the point I was making, Yuki's great in saves. He steals a ton of bases. And he really was great this year. And I'm not sure if this is a super repeatable thing. I guess we'll find out next year if it is. But Yuki certainly did a great job of finding starting pitchers on the waiver wire and getting the best of them, particularly Johnny Cueto. Johnny Cueto was great this year. He added him back on July 9th. He's held him the rest of the year. He's got a 3.09 ERA looking. He's not really striking a ton of guys out, but he's ERA and whip wise, he's looking like vintage Johnny Cueto. Yuki, he only used 6 starts this week, and that came from just 4 different starting pitchers. Michaelis, Cueto, Quantrill, and Herman. But he was able to find guys that worked like that guy on the A's whose name I'm blanking on. And Cueto, of
Paul
course, I've
Blackburn.
mentioned. Paul Blackburn. Yep, that's the one. He's hurt, unfortunately, right now. But on the whole, yeah, absolutely great season for Yuki, and he played phenomenally this week. He put up an incredible fight. He scored 54 runs, 17 homers, 11 steals, ERA sub 3. ERA and WHIP are both very close. Yuki is not going to be in the semis this year, but he sure put up a fight. And really, all 4 teams that played this week played great. Conor wasn't incredible this week, but he certainly was in some categories. There was none of the 4 teams playing put up clunkers in their playoff matchup. Everyone should be proud of how their team played.
Absolutely. But before we get to Conor and my matchup, who did you want to name the matchup MVP?
Yeah, so there were a lot of people who played well for both teams. I'll start by saying, had Yuki's team won, I would have given it to Jake McCarthy, who had a 519 on base. He stole 5 bases, 5 of Yuki's 11. Additionally, he did hit a homer. He scored 6 runs and drove in 6. Those 6 RBIs did flip RBI for Yuki. So that's really about as good of a matchup, particularly with the 5 steals that anyone could hope for. I'll also say he got 4 homers from Dalton Varsho. He had a good week from Corbin Carroll, who had a pair of homers. Bryce Harper was not great this week in his first week back, and that was definitely something that Yuki could have used. But looking at my team, I'll give some honorable mentions here. An honorable mention to Brandon Nimmo, who drove in 7 runs, stole a base, and had a 448 OBP. He's a guy we were talking off air, who's kind of flown under the radar on my team, even though he was an early season trade acquisition. But he's a guy who's super crucial. I'll give an honorable mention to Lindor with his 3 doubles, Adley with his 3 doubles. An honorable mention to Jose Suarez, who I streamed on Monday against the Tigers, and he pitched 7 shutout innings. Framber Valdez struck out 11 as well. But matchup MVP, I'm feeling like a broken record because this is his 7th time winning matchup MVP and 2nd week in a row. It's Aaron Judge. It's always Aaron Judge. He had a 576 OBP this week. He only hit 2 homers, but he drove in 6 runs, which is crazy because he doesn't have anyone to drive in. He scored 6 runs and he stole another base. So Aaron Judge, matchup MVP. What a season for this guy. I know he's never going to put up this level of production again, which is kind of why I got to strike while the iron's hot. I would have been really disappointed if I had lost in the first round with the season Judge is putting up and with, the season that Jordan Montgomery and Framber Valdez have been putting up since being acquired by my team. I think having these guys all performing at their best, it sure would be a shame if I had lost in the first round. And these guys all propelled me to the second round, to the semis.
Very great matchup MVP pick for you. Judge has been killing it. Lots of Diamondbacks you named for Yuki. Their lineup has low-key been pretty good recently. It's suddenly a little tougher matchup.
Yeah, they are. I didn't even mention Josh Rojas, his other Diamondback, but he drove in 5 runs and stole a base as well.
Yeah, if only Ketel Marte could pick it up like the rest of them, but yeah, it's just the way it goes. Let's turn it over to my matchup against Conor. I won 11-1. I was kind of hoping for that 12-0. I was up 12-0 at one point yesterday, but Conor got a few late home runs. Conor's team did not play all that bad. 17 home runs, 51 RBIs, 5 steals. a 4.19 ERA, 115 WHIP. Like those are all solid or better. 71 strikeouts, but I mean, I just kind of, you know, handedly beat him in a lot of these categories, and some of the categories that I narrowly won were categories where both of us just played really well. I almost broke the runs record at 68 runs. The runs record, I believe, is 71. 20 doubles, 55 ribbies, 6 steals, a 377 OBP. That was fantastic. I put up 8 quality starts. Honestly, could have been more, but Nola got rained down on Sunday, 88 Ks, 5 saves and 3 holds, which was good to see because I haven't really been putting up good saves or holds numbers recently. The 3.46 ERA wasn't my best ERA, but more than
Nothing
enough.
to complain about.
Yeah, nothing to complain about. This was a nice bounce back after the disappointment that was the Ruthvik matchup the week before. And my team hasn't been playing quite this good. Like this was like I think one of my more elite performances of the year. My team maybe like the 8 to 10 weeks before that Ruthvik matchup was playing at a really high level, but like I think this was even a level a little above that. I hope I can keep this momentum going through the semis, but it was definitely a fun week for my team. The matchup never really felt close. There were a couple points where I thought maybe Conor could get some advantages, and his team just was not ever able to make it through. But kudos to Conor in a great season. Obviously coming off of the finals appearance last year, I think we're all a little curious what the encore would look like. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to upset me 2 years in a row, but I thought he put up a very solid season. I think that he still has a very solid roster going into next season. Definitely a year older for some of these guys, thinking about like the Verlanders and the Goldschmidts. But I still think he has a solid core that's going to be able to compete over the next few years, and I think he's going to be a tough out next year as well. I think you said it best earlier. He played pretty solidly. There's a couple categories that maybe weren't the best, but Conor put up a good fight this week, and unfortunately my team just kind of went off. So there's just nothing he was able to do about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Your team right now, and last week was definitely an anomaly, but you are just kind of looking like Erik looked last year. You're the 3 seed, but you just put up an absolute world-beating performance in round 1. You looked a little bit vulnerable on Friday, I believe. I think it was 7-4-1, and Conor was really close in a couple of categories, so it could have gone the other way at that point, but you just put on a clinic over the weekend. I mean, yeah, like you said, you ran down the list of categories, but 68 runs. I think at going into the playoffs last year, that would have been the runs record before Erik broke it, then broke it again. It's just all of these categories. This was like a top 1% week ever.
Yeah.
And you had it in your first round matchup. There's really nothing to critique here. Home runs was above average, but not by a lot. And ERA was above average, but not by a lot. And same with holds. But other than that, everything was elite. And yeah, you're right. It's not like Conor played bad. Sure, the on base percentage was rough, and the ERA was rough, but he did have good week there from Tristan McKenzie. But other than that, that would have beaten this week would have beaten a lot of teams. I'm calculating right now to see if me and Yuki would have beaten him. Yeah, Yuki. So me and Yuki would have both beaten him, but he would have. But if this was a regular season matchup, he would have won maybe 2/3 of the time with these numbers. So it's just the fact that he's in the playoffs and all 4 playoff teams played well. The fact that he played the worst of the 4 playoff teams is not a knock on his team at all. He did drive in 51 runs. He struck out 71 batters. His whip was better than both mine and Yuki's. One guy he did have a great week from, and hopefully this is something he can look towards for the future, is Eloy Jimenez. who hit 3 home runs, drove in 9, 484 on base. He's been hurt for a good chunk of the year. He's only got 227 at bats right now, but he's got a 380 on base. He's slugging 511. These are remarkable numbers. And if he was playing every day, if he was healthy for the full season, he'd be a top 5 outfielder with these numbers, perhaps.
Right. I think it's the same thing with Luis Robert too. Robert has 12 home runs and 11 steals and 384 plate appearances, a 331 OBP. He's still young. He's only 24, but he's only done that 92 games. He's been, especially over the last month and a half, just like I think he's played like 8 games over the last month, and a lot of it he hasn't even spent on the IL. He's just been banged up. So there's some young pieces on this team that Conor has that I look at, and I'm sure, we're just like, hey, they take the next step forward, maybe Conor jumps up a tier here, but it's kind of up to them. That's what's tricky about some of these young players, prospects that come up, development's not linear. And health can take a toll, unfortunately. Erik saw that this year with Wander Franco, for example. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, Moncada had a good week too.
He did.
But really, me and Eric were talking about this last year. Connor's team is low key old. I mean,
It
he's got
is.
his 3 young White Sox, but other than that, he's got Goldschmidt and he's got Story and he's got Sal Perez and
Justin
uh,
Turner.
Justin Turner. I think Hoskins is still fairly young, but even his rotation,
Hoskins,
you look at Merrill Kelly and you look at Robbie Ray.
Wade
Um,
Miley.
yeah, Wade Miley. His only young people are his White Sox. Kyle Gibson's old. So really, and the
It,
White Sox had a good week this week. So, but he's in the future. He is the off White Sox. He's going where the White Sox go.
yeah, it's kind of like Reese Hoskins will be 30 starting next season. So I really think is like
Wow, that's older than I thought.
his under 30 contingent. Semien's also old. We didn't mention him. His under 30 contingent next year is really Eloy, Verdugo. Uh, I think Buxton might be 30 now. He's been around for a
He's
while. No,
28. Byron Buxton is younger than Reese Hoskins. What?
yeah. Uh, but okay, but Buxton will be 29 next year, and then you have Eloy, Verdugo, Robert, Moncada, McKenzie, Urquidy, Giolito, and Kopech. And not all of those names I've listed had good seasons either, or were able to stay healthy. Like Giolito was not particularly good this year. Kopech's kind of struggled a bit down the stretch. So yeah, you're right. This could be a transitional off season for him. Maybe he sticks the path and doubles down, but I could also see a scenario in which he tries to trade as many of these older pieces as he can to maybe restart. Because I don't know what he could realistically add that would maybe jump him up to that top tier. And maybe I'm wrong because Connor's pulled off some great trades, but I look at this team right now and I'm concerned that he peaked last year with the finals appearance, which, like, to be clear, no shame. Only 2 teams have won the league in 4 years. And just in general, it's incredibly hard to win a league, let alone make it to the finals. But I wonder if he has the juice to, be a realistic contender to get back there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, last year it kind of felt like a miracle run, but there was definitely a lot he did right last year, and he got a lot of good pieces, but those pieces were old, and he's got to kind of retool in a certain way. He's got to figure out how to do that, I think, if he wants to get back to the semis or the finals. He's definitely made more good moves than bad moves during his time in the league. He's built his team up from absolute nothing to the finals. So I sure don't doubt him that he can get back there. But we've talked a lot about the team that lost. Let's talk about the team that won. That's your team.
Yes.
I know we mentioned how great of a week you had, but running down the list of guys on your team, Matt Chapman hit three doubles. Carlos Correa hit three homers with seven RBIs. George Springer scored seven times. Max Muncy, probably runner up for matchup MVP, had a 500 on base, nine ribbies, three homers. Trey Turner scored seven runs. Your Dodgers, I said last week, you got a rough week for your Dodgers, but all your Dodgers played well. Mookie Betts was kind of mediocre, but the rest of your Dodgers played well and carried you. I'm skipping over the last guy for now. Um, Brandon Woodruff was incredible this week. Two quality starts, 16 Ks. This is matchup MVP, 9 weeks out of 10. Garrett Cole struck out 14 guys in 6 2/3 innings. Aaron Nola was great. Your whole team was great. Chris Bassett was great. I know he wasn't great today, Monday, but he was great for you last week.
Yeah.
Um, but your matchup MVP, and I'm sure you have veto power over this, but it's Freddie Freeman, 593 on base. That's just outstanding, outlandishly good. And he to tack on three homers, eight ribbies, seven runs. And you just don't get much better than that. And he carried your team. Not to say he carried your team hard, because you, in theory, would have been fine without him. But that's the type of week that can win a finals. That's just out there, outstanding.
Yeah, I think this team, and you brought up the Dodger angle here, right? The four Dodger bats were fantastic this week. I mean, Betts wasn't as good as the rest of them, but still great. I had a quality start from Tyler Anderson, a quality start from Julio Urias. I think these Dodgers, especially the Dodger bats, are really going to be key for me, and I think I'm going to go. You could argue I'm going to go as far as they go. Freeman, Turner, and Betts are 3, 4, and 6 in the player rater right now. So they are my three best bats. Altuve's also killing it too. Who would have thought? Altuve is on pace or close to on pace for a 25-20 season right now. It's nice to see the stolen bases come back, but these three Dodgers that are batting 1, 2, 3 atop their lineup, I think are really going to be key for me. And that was the reason I went out and spent significant assets on Mookie Betts, on Trey Turner. Because I really think these are guys who could carry a team, and if they do that this week, then I think I have a really good chance of pulling out a W. But it was good to see them dominate last week.
Yeah,
That
no, you go where the Dodgers go, and the Dodgers are the best team in the league, one of the best teams we've ever seen in the history of baseball. And Connor goes where the White Sox go, and the White Sox are a mediocre team that's kind of making a playoff push. My hockey team goes where the Anaheim Ducks go, and they're not that great.
I think you mean
So it's
Canada.
all so if you those are the pros and cons of stacking one lineup is just if the team has a rough week, or if the team faces a bunch of great pitchers in a row, then you're just kind of stuck with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, while we are on the topic of that, I don't want to jump ahead here, but one of the things that was definitely attractive to me is the Dodgers do play 8 games in the finals. So they play all 7 days plus a doubleheader in there. So if they do make it to that point, that's certainly interesting, kind of looking ahead at the scheduling for some of these matchups. But yeah, I mean, I banking on the best team in the league is usually something you want to do. So we'll see if it actually works out.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, any final words on your team, or are we ready to wait a minute? You streamed Carson Kelly this week?
I did. Wilson Contreras landed on the IL. Carson Kelly's been catching for me all week.
Hey,
Uh,
I mean, he scored 4 runs. He had a 357 on base. Overall, good stream.
yeah, no, he hasn't really been playing every day, but they play Colorado this past weekend. And I really wanted to stream him from that, and that worked out nicely. And honestly, I'm kind of riding this wave right now. We'll see how it goes. I don't know if he's gonna definitively stay on the roster for the full week. I might just kind of stream a hot catcher or someone who's playing, or maybe even go without a catcher for a couple of days if I want to stream an extra reliever or something. But yeah, he was a nice addition. He's actually batting leadoff tonight. That should be fun. Actually,
Nice. How about
this.
that?
Yeah, I have the 1, 2, 3, and 5 hitters for the Dodgers tonight, and the 1 and 2 hitters for the Diamondbacks tonight, and that'll be fun.
It's a very Yuki thing of you to do with the Diamondbacks hitters.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like Yuki right now, but it's kind of working, so I'm gonna go with it. But yeah, let's unless you have anything else to add about my matchup, I think I'm good. I don't want to talk about my team too much because I could, but I want to save all the listeners from having to listen to me.
Yeah, no, let's get into previewing the semis now. It's semis week. It's here. It's we were saying this off air. Well, you said it first and I agreed with you, but semis week is bigger than finals week.
Yes.
So just because maybe it's because there are two matchups going instead of one, and maybe it's because there hasn't been a bad semis matchup in the history of the league. Um, Two bangers last year, two bangers in 2020 of the highest degree.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember anything prior to that. I'm just looking up the 2019 semis.
Erik blew out Moneyball, and EBO blew me out. That was the one year we did 2-week playoff matchups. EBO blew me out that first week, and I came back the second week, but it wasn't enough. 19,
Yeah, 20.
I played into semis, but it wasn't super close or anything. It was a little anticlimactic. But I think the other
Yeah,
matchup.
2019, Erik blew out EBO. You beat Anthony by a wide margin, but it looks like a lot of categories were close, so that's one that maybe could have flipped. And I don't know, I don't remember what the sentiment was at the time, but looking back, not a lot would have had to change for Anthony to be in the finals. But if you don't remember it feeling close, I'm sure maybe he got some garbage time runs or something.
Yeah, maybe he's kind of like where I felt like Conor was on Friday. Like, yeah, some of the categories were close, but I felt like I was in control the entire time, despite it kind of tightening up a little bit.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I
But yeah,
mean, the
either way, yeah,
2020
in the
was,
podcast era, great semis all around.
yes, they have been. I mean, the 2020 semis might have been the most thrilling week of dynasty baseball that we've had. I mean, just that Sunday, especially that ending was nuts. We have not seen anything like that. Anything match that level of intensity. I will say the finals matchup in 2020 came down to the last day, but like I blew out EBO that last day. Like my team just went on fire. So it wasn't really much of a debate, after the 1 o'clock games that Sunday. But like, yeah, it was last year's finals is a little bit of a stinker too. But yeah, it's really those semis matchups.
It
Um,
is. Yeah, we love them. It feels like the climax of the season, two teams going at it, two matchups. Just a ton of fun, and the finals is kind of the epilogue. I'm sure. I mean, it determines the winner, and maybe I'm just saying this because I've never been in a final, so it's so the semis have always naturally been the conclusion of my season.
as someone
But
who's
I don't
played
know.
in two finals matchups, I would say that the semis has had more intensity. I certainly felt more stressed out playing you into semis year 3 than I did playing EBO into finals.
Yeah, that's true, and those were both close matchups.
Yeah, those were both incredibly close. I mean, and that's the thing is like I feel like you and I last year. So if y'all recall, episode number 1 of the podcast era, was that us recapping the semis or was that us previewing the semis?
Episode one of the podcast was us recapping the semis.
Okay, so that's what I thought. But like even then, I think you and I both felt pretty good about our prediction that we were going to win. I certainly felt good about my prediction that I was going to win. I thought you and Eric was going to be a close one, but you know, we thought we had it all figured out. Is the point that I'm trying to make. And the reality with these semis matchups, especially all the playoff matchups, but these semis matchups, it seems like especially is that we think it's going to go one way, and then chaos just happens, and it doesn't go how we think it's going to go at all. And we're going to make a bunch of predictions right now, and they're somehow all going to turn out wrong. Anything else you'd like to say before we dive into these matchups here?
Yeah, nothing really, other than quick trivia question. Who were our third place teams the first two seasons of the league? Who won who were our semis losers who ended up winning the third place matchup, which doesn't count for anything and teams don't set their lineups for. But it does show up as third place on ESPN as you finishing there. So who were our first two third place teams?
I imagine I was one of them in 2018. And in 2019, I'm going to say it was EVO.
All right. In 2018, that is correct. You were our third place team. You beat Yuki 10-1 in the third unofficial third place matchup. I guess it wasn't Yuki. I guess it was Matt Kickert.
Matt squared. Yeah.
Yeah. He. I don't even think it was the second Matt at that point. Matt Kickert's a good fantasy player. I know he won our seasonal league in 2017. I wonder if he had, I guess, if he had stuck around with this league. I wonder if he would have, if he could have been one of our top teams. But anyway, yeah. Oh, it was Matt and Griffin. That's what it was.
Griffin, that's who it was. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Matt and Griffin, then just Matt, then Matt squared, then Matt and Yuki, then Yuki, and just Yuki.
Yeah, just Yuki. And yes, you were correct as well. 2019 EBO was the third place team. They beat Anthony 7-5. And what was very nearly the pitcher or the hitter matchup unofficially. EBO won whip, but other than that, they won all the hitting categories. Anthony won all the other pitching categories. EBO had a 400 batting or had a 400 OBP, which did not count. But yeah, just kind of fun looking at the matchups that don't count before we start talking about some ones that do count.
Absolutely. I always love some good M-SABR trivia, especially pre-podcast era, which now feels so long ago. Even parts of the podcast era, I feel like they were pretty long ago at this point. But let's which one do you want to start out with? You want to start out with UV Eric or me versus Jake?
Let's start out with the rivalry week rematch. Me versus Eric. Just 2 weeks ago, we squared off. I beat him for only the second time ever. It didn't matter to him, but it sure mattered to me because otherwise I would have been the 5 seed and I would have lost the tiebreaker to Yuki. Yeah, I would have been going home had I not beaten Eric in week 20. So I'm sure he's kicking himself that he has to face me instead of Yuki in the semis. And yeah, I think just the storylines there, the storylines for both matchups are great, but for this one especially, one, it's rivalry week rematch. I beat him last time we faced. This is 2 years in a row now. We have split the regular season series and faced off in the semis. Last year he got the best of me in the semis. This year is a rematch of that, so a lot of fun there. Eric has never lost a playoff matchup. On one hand, I've never won a playoff matchup against a team that isn't Yuki. I'm 2-0 against Yuki and 0-2 against not Yuki. But on the other hand, I've never lost a playoff matchup to a team that didn't end up winning the finals. So if Erik wins, he wins the finals. That's a guarantee. Uh, but he didn't play last week. Maybe his team's a little rusty, but he is still undefeated in the playoffs. I think it's a perfect 8-0. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. We've seen my team uh super banged up. I've got 5 starters on the IL. I've got 9 players injured. I've got to keep Anthony Rizzo on my bench. I played shorthanded last week. Um, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. So because of that, I've had to stream bats, which is the thing that we say Erik does. Erik's the bat streamer, and it's worked out for him. And I've kind of been thrust into that role. For example, today, Monday, am streaming Brian Anderson because he plays 2 games. It's a doubleheader, and hey, guess what? He's 4 for 8. He's scored a run and driven in a run. I feel like I've been good at streaming this year. I've been streaming Isaiah Kiner Falefa. He had a great last week for me. I've had TJ Friedel on my roster. He scored a run Monday. But yeah, I've kind of taken on the Erik strategy in a lot of ways. Erik's kind of, on the other hand, had a solid core much more than ever. And sure, he picked up Elvis Andrews last week.
Dude, he's been on a tear.
I know he was on a tear at the start of the season, and I owned him for a few days. He was unowned for a while. Erik owned him in July, but now Erik's got him back, and you're right, he's been remarkable.
Fun fact, do you remember who drafted Elvis Andrews?
AJ.
Nope. Who was
it?
He was a big league yellow champ.
Really?
He was.
How about that? How long did he stick on your team?
Let's pull up the trade where I traded him away. Because I was very unhappy with him to start out. I don't know why I drafted him. I think I saw shortstop he's going to play a lot. He's actually, in my defense, he's coming off like a 2020 season. It was really bizarre. But I traded him in a trade of Allens. It was Elvis Andrews and Logan Allen for Cody Allen.
Oh.
This was June 9th. This was shortly after I acquired Gene Segura to be my shortstop. So
you had your shortstop, and now you're upgrading the bullpen. But yeah, Elvis Andrews is on Erik's team. But yeah, like I was saying, he's mostly got his core down, even if he's picked up guys like Andrews and like Lars Nootbaar, who was a midseason acquisition, who was great, although he had a terrible last week, so maybe he's off of Erik's roster by mid this week.
He dropped. And I mean, he dropped Joey Menzies, which was interesting because that was like this year's Frank Schwindel. And
did he drop him or did he just demote him?
I think he outright dropped him because I think he's out of. Let me double check this, but I think he's out of plate. The eligibility. He's out of eligibility.
Well, time flies.
Time really does fly. As Bubba Thompson just scores again for him. That's another streamer of his.
Yeah, one of those very Erik players who's not only a streamer but a streamer with minor league eligibility.
Oh my god. Yeah, Erik perfects that to no end. Which can be frustrating. And it's honestly, and that's what's the scariest part about Erik's team during playoff time. And I think you see this more in a seasonal league than a dynasty league.
Breaking news: Framber Valdez finished the complete game.
Damn, complete game shutout.
Complete game shutout. What a start.
That bodes well for you. And we'll get to your pitching matchups in a second because that's an interesting one. Interesting set of pitching matchups you have. But I think the one thing that's interesting to me about your matchup with Erik this week is that, like, obviously Erik is very good into playoffs. because he's flexible. He identifies who's hot, and he doesn't overthink it too much. He just picks them up. And you see this a lot more in seasonal leagues. You don't see this as much in dynasty leagues because you want to keep these guys. But in seasonal leagues, when you get to the playoffs and you get to the last couple of weeks, it's all about riding the hot hand to win the league. It's not necessarily about your commitment to a player for the full season or where you drafted them. And that's why I'm a little curious to see, you rostering an extra player who's IL eligible because you want to play a little more of the dynasty game here. I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm not saying it's a bad decision, and I think it could benefit you if some of these guys come back later in the week and they perform really well for you. But it's definitely something that's interesting to me as I see this matchup develop.
Yeah, so for those who weren't in our off-air conversation, which is everyone, that player that Sahil was referring to is Harrison Bader, who I could have cut by this point, and it's tough. But I like the idea of Harrison Bader getting steals down the stretch. Harrison Bader, I grew a little bit of a fantasy attachment to him, winning me matchups the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season with his stolen bases. So I've never had a guy like that who could, who was just scoring runs and stealing bases. And really, I thought he rounded out my roster in a very unique and good way. So I think he just kind of fits with my team a little bit. I gave up Hyunjin Ryu for him, who was someone I gave up Jazz Chisholm for. And I think he's the type of guy who can not only if I make the finals, because he's supposed to be back in the next week or so. So if I make it that far, then I could see him playing a key role, and I don't want to lose that. And additionally, if this isn't the last season in league history, there's still more to play. There's another season, if he's on my team next season like I planned, then I think that'll be great. I think I want him to kind of be part of my team.
Absolutely. I think it's, definitely different ways to approach it. I'm not saying one approach is the correct approach or one approach is the wrong approach. But there's certain benefits and costs to both sides of the coin here. I mean, I know that some very solid players have been cut during semis and finals week that people have regretted cutting because they've wanted to win. And sometimes it works out for them because they win, and sometimes it doesn't. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out for both of you. Breaking news, Jake just got back-to-back 2-run home runs very quickly, one from Corey Seager, one from Bo Bichette.
Wow, you love to see it.
He now has 2 home runs and 6 ribbies today. I have zeros in both categories. But yes, we'll get to that matchup in a second. The pitching in your matchup is what I think is the most interesting. We obviously talked about Framber. Framber at the time of recording threw a complete game against the Tigers. What a surprise. It's the Tigers. But you have Darvish against Seattle, Clayton Kershaw against Arizona, Jordan Montgomery against Milwaukee. Those are all pretty solid matchups. Noah Syndergaard against Miami. That's a good matchup. Sean Manaea against Arizona. Both of those on the road. Saturday, you have nobody. And then Sunday, you have Framber pitches against Oakland. What a great 2 start for him. Darvish goes to Arizona, and Jordan Montgomery pitches against Cincinnati at not in Cincinnati. So you get the better ballpark in St. Louis to pitch in. I don't really see a negative matchup in there. Like, all those are at worst neutral for you. And at best, like with Framber, with the Detroit and Oakland, like plus matchups. And I know you're still missing McClanahan. I know you're still missing Wheeler, but like the guys you do have, like this should be a good one for you. It's only 9 starts, but it's 9 very good matchups.
Yeah, I think it means I can afford to stream Paulo Espino.
Oh my god.
My guy, my hero. my main man.
Oh. But turning over to Erik's pitchers here, nobody's starting today. Tomorrow he has streamed Bailey Falter against Miami. That was actually Pitcher List's stream pick of the day. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Erik has 5 starters going on Wednesday, including Dylan Cease against Colorado, not in Colorado, it's in Chicago. Corbin Burns against St. Louis. He's going up against Adam Wainwright. David Peterson is going against the Cubs, and Drew Smiley is going up against the Mets. Thursday, he has Pablo Lopez against Philly. He's got Lance Lynn against Detroit on Friday. That's a nice matchup. If he chooses to start Shohei as a pitcher on Saturday, Shohei gets the Mariners. And Sunday, he would get Bailey Falter again at Atlanta if he chooses to start him at Atlanta, which I'm not sure is what Erik really intends to do there. Solid group of pitching matchups. I don't think it's as lucrative as yours, but I think in terms of the quantity, it is definitely there. One interesting tidbit with this too, if Erik does beat you and makes it to the finals, I think like Cease and Burns and Wainwright and Pablo Lopez like could all line up for 2 starts that last week. It's not a guarantee, but things can get pushed back and stuff. But the way they are lined up right now, it is certainly a possibility. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. If he gets past me, he will definitely be well set up for the finals.
yeah.
But yeah, that's basically all I had to say about this matchup, other than the fact that just like last year's semis, this is a matchup for the Dynasty belt. I took it from Yuki last week. I guess it's interesting. How do we want to do that? And I guess it's my belt. So I'm the one who made these stupid rules, so I get to decide. But on one hand, the rule is if you tie a team, then the team that held the belt initially keeps the belt. So we did win the same number of categories. But on the other hand, I advanced past Yuki, which would lead me to believe that I take the belt from him.
I think
Uh,
I think you should give you the belt because I think that the belt, unless the last team that holds it doesn't make the playoffs, I think that the belt should end the season with the team that wins the championship.
okay, because I did in a sense conquer Yuki.
You
I took the belt from him, advancing past him. But on the other hand, I tied him. If this was a regular season, this would go in the records as a tie.
I think it's a playoff exception because it goes down as a win here because you advanced.
All right, we have precedent now.
Yeah, we have precedent now. There you go.
That's a law term.
That is a lot term. I was thinking it as soon as you said that, and I didn't want to be the one who said that. So thank you for saying that. But anyways, um let's move on to the other matchup here. Me versus Jake. Things are looking really good for Jake. It's early. Betts and Turner have both flown out to right since we started talking about the Dynasty belt. So I have a full 12 starts this week. Chris Bassett was one of them. He did not have a good start against the Cubs today, 3 2/3, 5 earned. Tyler Anderson is pitching today against Arizona. I have Garrett Cole going against Boston. Tomorrow, Charlie Morton at San Francisco on Wednesday. Nobody on Thursday. Friday, I have Max Fried against Philly, Marcus Stroman home against Colorado, so that's in Chicago, and then Julio Urias at the Giants. Saturday, I have Chris Bassett against Pittsburgh and Aaron Nola at Atlanta. And Sunday is Garrett Cole at Milwaukee and Tyler Anderson at San Francisco. Brandon Woodruff against the Yankees. So a Cole Woodruff matchup on Sunday. The Tyler Anderson game on Sunday is at 7 o'clock, so I hypothetically might not even start him if I have the pitching categories locked up and I don't want to mess with them. So that's definitely one to watch out for. Jake, on the other hand, has nobody starting today. He's got Sandy Alcantara against Philly tomorrow. Alcantara hasn't been as sharp recently. I'll be curious to see how he does, but three of his last six starts, he's given up four earned or more. Um, he's got Jose Suarez at Cleveland. Wednesday, so Jake's another team where if he advances, he could have a big two-start week next week. Because on Wednesday, he's got Luis Castillo against the Padres, Frankie Montas at Boston, Carlos Rodon versus Atlanta, and Edward Cabrera playing Philly. Thursday, he has Carlos Carrasco against Pittsburgh. Friday, he has Blake Snell at Arizona. Saturday, he has nobody. And Sunday, he has Sandy Alcantara at Washington. It feels like he has some room to stream if he so desires. I believe he has fewer pitchers than I do. I think he has about nine going. So that'll be interesting. I don't look at there are a couple of these individual pitchers that have solid matchups, but I think for the most part, it's not like you, especially, or Eric, where I feel like the pitchers have like a lot easier matchups. These aren't easy matchups at all for a lot of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see how the pitching goes. We've talked about my Dodger hitters a lot. That's really going to help control how my offense does. And Jake has some hot bats coming into this matchup. So Bichette's been a lot hotter recently. Yordan Alvarez is starting to pick it up a little bit after getting back with the hand injury. Michael Harris has been on fire. Stephen Kwan's been better recently. So this will be a fun one. I'm 0-2 against Jake on the year after going 2-0 against him last year. Actually, since early June, the only two matchups I've lost have been to Jake. So this one will be interesting. It'd be nice to get some revenge if I can, but I'm not counting on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a revenge week. You lost both your matchups to Jake this season. Yeah, so both of these are revenge matchups in a way. I guess if you go back far enough in time, every matchup's a revenge matchup in some way. But yeah, this one for sure is even if it doesn't have quite the same storylines that me versus Eric does, it's still quite the interesting matchup. I know Jake wasn't super impressed with how his team played last week. I know he's glad he had that bye. Meanwhile, you're coming into this matchup incredibly hot with how you played last week against Conor. So yeah, it's you gotta be another good one. Either you get back to the finals after missing last year, or we see once again another first time team in the finals for the second year in a row if Jake can make it there.
We could see two first-time teams in the finals if you also make it.
We could. That'd be an exciting matchup.
I don't agree with that sentiment, but I appreciate that you have your own opinion on that question.
But yeah, what else do you have to? Anything else you have to say about your UV Jake?
No, I think what I will say about these four matchups as a whole is I think these are the four best teams left, and I think they're going to be close, and it's one of those where even if they aren't close, like if we played each other 10 times, like both of these matchups, if you played Eric the next 10 weeks and I played Jake the next 10 weeks, like we'd go 5-5 in those 10. Like it's going to be close no matter how it goes down. And it's interesting this year too. What I think adds another wrinkle to this is, last year there's a little bit of a difference in the standings between like me as the 1 seed versus you and Eric kind of as the 2-3, or like a half game between each other. And then there's a little bit of a gap before Conor at 4. All 4 of these teams finished within a half game of each other. Eric finished a half game above you, me, and Jake. You, me, and Jake all finished with identical winning percentages. So this might be about as evenly matched of a semis group of matchups that we've had in a while.
Yeah, no, for sure. And not that the semis are ever not evenly matched. But again, the matchup we thought last year was primed to be a blowout ended up with an upset. So there's also that. But yeah, no, absolutely. Uh, this is really not one that you can predict.
No, no, not at all. But we do make predictions here every week at the pitcher or the hitter. We are the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League, and we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't make predictions. But
Glad you
before,
realized I was setting you up.
yeah, thank you for that. But before we make our predictions,
Uh,
um, let's review last week's predictions that we made. You and guest picker Erik both won 2-0 with an extra shout out to you for picking that you would tie against Yuki and that you would tie 6-6. That doesn't happen that often. So kudos to you there. I correctly picked you to win, but I also picked Conor to win, and I was wrong about that. So I am now 71, 31, and 20. You are 69, 27, and 26. And the guest picker is won 2-1 and 3 week 5 and is 2-0 this week. So the guest picker in the season is 4-1 and 3.
hey, look at that. The guest
Was the
picker was
guest
Erik
picker
both
Erik?
times.
Yeah, it was Erik both times. Okay. That's what I thought. But since you have the better pick'em record now, I believe you make the first pick this time.
Oh boy. Yeah. Do I get extra points for getting the score right or getting I know I think in the finals last year we went by category and each category was its own point. I don't think that's a first round thing. Um
Um, what if let's give you an extra win?
okay, cool.
For so we'll give you 70. For that'll be the rule. If we pick a score right, we'll give ourselves an extra win.
All right. We don't get 12 extra wins for it being 12 categories.
How about in the finals we go by category?
Cool.
Because
Um
I think that'll part of the reason last year I think we added extra to it was so that like I was far enough ahead of you where it wasn't going to matter if we would just do a solo pick, but that way it adds a little intrigue to see which one of us wins. You know, it's a competition for fun, so uh, it'd be nice to have us have something to play for in the final week.
yeah, no, sounds like a plan. So I'll make my picks. I think that you are going to beat Jake. Let's call it 7-5. I think your team is playing really well right now. I could see you winning even by a little more than that, but let's go 7-5. I just kind of have confidence in your team, that you're unlike last year, you're peaking down the stretch. Um, as for my team, I think it'd be kind of boring if I picked against myself. You know, it's the semis. I don't want to pick against myself. I think I will beat Erik in yet another close one. Let's call it 6-5-1.
Ooh,
Uh,
you did predict a me versus you finals on last week's podcast, so that does hold.
yeah,
With what
nothing's changed there. But what that would mean if my predictions are right is just like last year, it's the 3v4 in the finals. And the
that'd be
playout and the finals matchup we were promised last year but never got.
I think you and I, in our hearts, both thought that that was going to be the playoff matchup, and it didn't happen. It would be fitting if we got that playoff matchup a year later. I told you, okay, so time for my picks. I told you before we started recording that I didn't think I would know who I was going to pick between you and Erik until we started recording. Um, and I don't feel necessarily any closer to feeling confident. It's tricky because Erik has more of a quantity with the pitching, and I don't think his pitching matchups are too far off from yours in terms of being good. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I just feel like Erik's in game or in week managing is going to give him an edge, but an edge in the sense that I think you're going to tie for the second consecutive week. And I think
Hmm.
that he will win a tiebreaker. As for Jake and I, my matchup versus Jake is tricky. I think when we were talking last year at this time about my matchup with Conor, I'd started 13-0 in the season and finished the season 3-3-1. It was not a great finish. I wasn't necessarily going to the playoffs with a ton of momentum. Uh, and I was dealing with some key injuries. This year, my team is relatively healthy. The players that I do have that are hurt are like good players, but not like make it or break it players. You know, Wilson Contreras, Nick Castellanos, and Michael Brantley do not represent the core of my team. What concerns me a little bit about my team is still the fact that I'll be playing a man down with Tatis. And also just I don't love all of my pitching matchups. This could honestly like go both ways. I think I could make a convincing argument one way or another, but I picked Jake to win 9-1 in the chat uh earlier this week when Jake mentioned something about his team, and I'm going to stand by that pick. And that's a really big gap, but for some reason that was a number I came up with earlier this week, and I'm going to stick by that number.
Wow. All right. What a prediction. So what would the hypothetical storylines be for your finals match for the finals matchup if yours went that way?
If it's Erik v. Jake,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the top two seeds. I think of all the potential storylines, if you're putting together a ranking of the finals matchups by storyline, that one definitely comes in last place, I would think. Um, and the reason I'd say Erik v. Jake would be in last place is it gives me a lot of Erik v. Conor vibes last year, where you kind of have the upstart that goes against Erik, and then maybe the upstart loses. I mean, it'd be a whole different story if Erik actually lost. But like you versus Jake would be interesting because we'd have a first time winner, you know, and then I don't have to explain to you why me versus you or me versus Erik is a fun storyline. But yeah, I think Erik v. Jake. I recall a couple of years ago. This is a comparison I think about when the Patriots played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and the Saints played the Rams. And like all of them were going to be really good matchups, but the one that nobody really wanted was the Patriots and the Rams. They thought that was going to be the most boring of the matchups, and it ended up being kind of a clunker of a game. And not that I think Erik v. Jake wouldn't be a clunker, but I think relative to what the hype around the other types of matchups would be, like I think this is the clear fourth.
I don't know. Because you remember earlier in the season the matchup that flipped on 2 days after the fact, that Erik v. Jake matchup where Jake had the win over Erik, that didn't that we talked about on the podcast, and it didn't end up existing. I think I kind of love that matchup for that reason. It ended up being a tie. And then of course Jake won the rematch. So he could have been 2-0. He ended up being 1-0-1. So I don't know. I like it for that reason, with it being the top two seeds, and Jake thinking he had the win over Erik when he didn't.
That's certainly fair. I mean, could you imagine if in the finals that happened? Scoring issue like that flips it.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, if it was if something like that happened, I mean, it would be happening to thousands of teams around the country, I'm sure.
Oh
So
yeah,
that'd be ESPN would get just demolished online.
they would. ESPN better hopes they get it right. The one thing I'll say about ESPN is like they did not handle the hey, we have fantasy football on Sunday with a whole bunch of other fantasy stuff going on. Like their fantasy cast did terrible yesterday, and I hope they have the kinks figured out.
Yeah, no, they're not great. They're really bad with hockey. But they're they're definitely bad with baseball on Sundays too.
I haven't had too many issues with baseball this year. It's just like when it was in conjunction with football, it didn't seem to they didn't seem to be able to handle the traffic.
Hmm.
Uh, but we shall see. Hopefully we're not dealing with any weird scoring stuff. It's kind of weird too. Like in the finals, it might be one thing, but in the semis, like because you kind of have to know what those matchups are. Like I
Right, yeah.
that might just be one of those, hey, that's it. Like whatever the end result is on Sunday is the end result.
I
Or
think, yeah, that kind of is because you can't be 2 days into a matchup and suddenly it's a different team slotting in.
yeah, I think it's whatever the score is when the games lock in on Monday is the score.
Man.
Uh,
But yeah, so those are um we spent a lot of time talking about hypothetical finals matchups. But yeah, we've got some semis to play. We got a full week ahead of us. Me versus Eric, you versus Jake, spots in the finals on the line. Do you have any final things to say here?
good luck to all four of these teams. I mean, even making it just to the semis is hard enough. Um, I know two teams are not going to get the result this week that they want, but it's we have all either now won a playoff game or had a bye to make it to this round. So we've all accomplished something in the playoffs already. And just good luck. I'm
Yeah,
scared.
absolutely. Good luck to everyone. And yeah, next time we see you, we will uh be talking about the finals matchup. It'll be our third semis recap in the podcast era, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Until next time.
Until next time.
Oh, baby, how you all I need is my buddy. I say I'm gonna get high. Oh, yeah.
This podcast is good.